Oh,
the
good for
schedule,
you.
and it's a regular schedule. So
Sure.
I'm looking forward to it in that. But I'll be back for your talk at 2 o'clock.
Okay. And I know that I think it's Amadra is going to be on. Everything will be recorded, so you can always go back at some point and listen.
Yeah, that's good.
Are you going to record your
Oh, she
massage,
just did.
Carol?
She just started the recording button.
Oh, she said Carol.
No, I was asking. Carol's getting a massage. I didn't know if she was going to do it in her home while she was watching
No,
Interfaith
no,
work.
no, no, no. I go to the YMCA for the massage.
All right.
Okay. All right. So we don't want to interrupt anymore, Jackie.
Jackie, you're on.
All right. Well, good to know that among the people who support this work and believe in it as much as I do. So, the way I want to design this, of course, since I'm among friends here, is the goal to make this more of a conversation piece. I said I don't want to be a talking head and just be like this, get along, happy, happy, joy, joy. I wanted to, but I like to do dialogue and conversations with people. And for those who don't know me, I've been doing a lot of this religion communication space work, particularly through broadcast, TV, and also print with radio. And then I came up with my own concept of interfaith connections that's been around since 2012. And now we have a meetup group to do more things outside of the communications online or broadcast space. And with the pandemic being over, we're pretty much getting down to the point of doing the pub theology gatherings in person again. So I'm pretty excited about that. My background, I started my interfaith journey being an intern at the Interfaith Alliance back in 2000 when I was a senior in college, and just been on that journey through the nonprofit sector, but always been connected to the interfaith space in some capacity. And then in 2012, I came up with the Interfaith Connections concept because I wanted to do something more that wasn't being offered at my church at the time. And since I like media and I like interfaith work, I combined the two, and that's been my story there. And then I joined a Religion Communicator Council like in the mid to late 2010s, and then eventually becoming their president. And I served there for about 2 years. And then now, like, I'm doing some other kind of career things, but the interfaith work always comes back up. So I'm so glad to do this opportunity again with your organization, Reverend Albert, because it's also your 10th anniversary. So I'm excited to be a participant with that. So pretty much about me. Let me jump to the screen here. I did kind of the welcoming there. So pretty much my goal is here is just to share some ideas with you today, but I don't want to spend, again, like I said, the whole time like talking to you from this screen here. I want to be able to have some dialogue, get some feedback, and show how interfaith understanding happens through conversation. So we're going to practice some of that together. And I'm looking forward to doing that. For those of you who may not be familiar with interfaith settings, because I never assume, I always act with conversation agreements, which I will put that up here on the screen for you. Here we go. So during the presentation, I invite attendees to approach this discussion with the following principles. Speak from your own experience, be curious rather than confrontational, ask questions to understand, not to trap someone, and it's okay to disagree respectfully. Respectfully, I always emphasize that. Respectfully. Avoid assuming one person represents an entire religious community. Since that happens in some of my previous groups where I do these kind of discussions. So I say always remind people that you're doing it from your experience, your perspective. And of course, make room for different voices and respect someone's right to not answer a question. All right. So for this group, question 1, when you hear the word interfaith, what comes to mind?
I guess I would say, this is Charles, Jackie. Nice to see you. I would say what comes to mind is just the connection between the faiths, because I believe that all of them are connected some kind of way.
Okay, cool. I feel the same way. There's definitely a connection there. Anyone else would like to share?
Well, I'll share. When I think of the word interfaith, I'm kind of going to piggyback on Charles's answer, and also just say that, I love the fact that when people come together of different faith traditions to get to know one another and talk and realize, oh my gosh, I'm kind of believing what you're believing, and just you see the commonality, not to make anybody come to your point of view, but just to find that commonality and enjoy the company. I feel like creating friendships is just such a beautiful part of the interfaith experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I made some good friends along the way doing this work. So I definitely agree with you on that.
Looks like Patrick.
Jackie is a good friend. Thank you, Jackie. And my answer is personal through my spiritual formation. The first thing that comes to mind when I hear interfaith is Swami Vivekananda at the 1893 Parliament of World's Religions in his speech, this call to dialogue and action that I've internalized as a duty. And so when I hear about interfaith, starting from the negative side of it, meaning apophatic, it's not interreligious, meaning it's not this particular denomination and that particular denomination that are coming together. It's not even interspiritual with these spiritual but not religious people coming together, but interfaith, people of faith of whatever kind, whether that's a religious faith, a spiritual but not religious faith, a faith in humanity, just faith, people of goodwill, coming together in appreciation and in a commitment to the common welfare, and finding ways through communicating and action to build a more compassionate world, a more interfaith also means to me, from a scholarly point of view, studying all of the different religions comparatively, finding what they have in common as a kind of contemplative core and an ethical core. So there's at least 4 ways that I think of interfaith, maybe even 5 there. So thank you.
Sure.
For me, I think the first time I really became aware of all of the multitudes of religions was I spent about 20 years doing a lot of traveling around the world. So I've been to India, I've been to China, I've been to most of South America, Europe, as well as the Middle East. And in every country, part of the tours always took us to the different religious denominations in those countries, and we would see the structures that were built by them. And I think the most important thing I discovered is that every place I ever went to, I always found God.
Nice.
And so because I could find God in every structure, I knew that every faith had validity, and that they were pieces of the bigger pie.
Nice.
Okay, cool. Which that will piggyback to the next kind of follow-up question to that. What experiences, positive or negative, have shaped the way you think about people from religious or spiritual traditions different from your own?
Can you put that question up?
Do I have it here? I might not have it here. I may have to write it I can type.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was just something that came to mind, but I will put it in the chat for you.
Oh, good. Yeah. Thank you.
I've got the chat here. All right, let's see. Okay, what experiences, positive or negative, have shaped the way you think about people from religious or spiritual traditions different from your own? Because I know particularly meeting us here tend to be in diverse spaces, meeting people from different traditions. And even within, everybody has their like sect or different denominations, whatever. You may notice that one colleague who might be Muslim may do something different from maybe a friend who's Muslim. I would say the different how they practice. Maybe one is more liberal, or more conservative. Maybe one is just like sometimes with Christians, it's like I only go to church, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, potlucks, versus maybe someone who goes every single Sunday and can let every single scripture that the minister or the pastor shared that day.
Well, it was interesting. I have my bachelor in architecture, and one of the early workshops was to design a spiritual place. What what's a what's a spiritual place? And my history is that my family was Jewish, and as soon as the rabbi told me I couldn't study the Kabbalah, I left the synagogue. And so I was always looking for the similarity between other faiths and what I found in Kabbalah, which was the mystical side of Judaism. And the interesting thing was in designing a space, a spiritual space, spiritual was what?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had to ask myself, how is that religious? Is God there? Do we pray? What are there candles? What? So I think just opening our minds to other possibilities that can make up our spiritual world is really important.
Okay.
Well, I had an experience, and this was back, Poly Interfaith team had begun, but Steve and I went up for a conference with the North American Interfaith Network, and that was in San Francisco. I think was it 2008, Steve?
Yeah.
Which blew our mind because there were so many people. We thought we were just a small little group here in San Diego, but then realized there's bigger groups out there doing things. And I had the one tradition that I had not come across in my life, knew of it, that kind of blew me away a little bit was I met a beautiful, beautiful lady who eventually I interviewed for my doctoral. Her name is Grove Harris. She's founder of the Temple of Understanding, and she is a Wiccan priestess. Now, Wicca is not something that interfaith people even talk about, and I believe that that is one tradition that needs to be brought to the table. That's just my opinion. However, because I had never met a person who practices Wicca, I was a little like unsure. I mean, it was easy for me to meet a person from the Jewish tradition or Hindu or Baha'i, but Wicca, I had not met her. I met anybody, and so I met her, had this wonderful conversation, and we talked and shared, and it was like, oh my gosh, there are elements of the Wicca tradition that in New Thought we believe the same thing. And it was kind of an eye opener that, again, another tradition that I wasn't familiar with we had some really commonalities. And for me, that was another eye opener, to meet somebody from a tradition I'd never met before, knew of. And I know some people hesitate when they talk about witches and Wicca, but if we could just get past that misinformation out there and really talk with people from these traditions. In fact, I even have a friend now, Deborah Gregory, who is a Wicca priestess. She's come to our labyrinth and done workshops, even did a presentation for Point once. So I think we need to, I don't know, reach out to a tradition you're so unfamiliar with and get to know them, because you'll be surprised. So that was my experience, and I forever am grateful for it.
Okay. Yeah.
My
Yeah, I
experience
agree.
was really much younger. I'm Catholic, and I grew up and went to Catholic schools. And when I was 7 years old, we were being told that the only people that God loved and would save were the Catholics, and everybody else was going to hell. And I very naively, because I'm basically an extremely curious person, I said, why would God create so many people he knew he was going to send to hell?
Mm-hmm.
That just seemed like a pretty stupid thing to do. and I got all hell for it. I mean, they just blew up and that. But so I've always wondered, no two humans are exactly the same. And so why should our beliefs and our way of doing anything that's different necessarily be wrong or inappropriate? It may not be appropriate for me, but it doesn't mean that it's inappropriate for somebody else. And over time, I realized also was that lots of things that seem to be very contradictory to each other can all be true.
One experience that I've had that has probably shaped the way I deal with people a great deal is just being able to see people of all different faiths and religions, um, see that there's a difference between somebody being spiritual versus religious. I feel that uh, there are many people who are highly spiritual and may not even be connected to a religion today. And then there are many people who are connected to religion and call themselves very religious, but they're not very spiritual. They don't live by the principles they profess. But then you also do find many people who are religious and actually practice their principles and try to live by them and create a better world. And so I find that I can always connect, regardless of what faith I may profess. I feel like I can always connect with spiritual people. And that is always my focus, is how can I connect to promote unity and peace and love and concord. But I find that I can usually do that mostly with people who are truly spiritual, regardless of what their faith or non-professed faith happens to be.
So it's an interesting question about meeting people from traditions different from my own. And so then it comes to the mind of, well, who's this other? And in fact, it may be others from within the tradition that I came up in. Because there's diversity inside, not just diversity between the different kinds of groups. When I was a child, my mother had me baptized Roman Catholic. And she claimed this as a victory over my father. I was Roman Catholic, not Lutheran like my father. And I said, well, what's the difference? And she says, I don't know, you're Roman Catholic. And that's that. Well, later, we moved around. We weren't really involved in any life of a congregation anywhere or in a parish. So it was Easter and Christmas ceremony, maybe a Sunday school at occasionally at this church or that church, but there was no consistency, there was no community. And when I looked around at what the Christians around me were saying and doing, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. And then they said, when I asked questions, the pastor couldn't answer questions that I had about, you say Jesus is the only God, but then you say he's got a father, and that's a God. So now there's two gods, and which one is the God? And they, don't add. And so, I read the Bible. So I read the Bible, and I can't get past the talking snake. Right? And so, this is ridiculous. Why would any thinking person, give any, because we were expected to take that literally, not figuratively or allegorically. So I just gave up on Christianity when I was younger. And I didn't come back to it until after I found Vedanta. I felt like Vedanta gave me the key that opened the doors to all of the traditions and all of the wisdoms, and gave me respect for that, could help me see the harmony of all of that, gave me appreciation for what Christianity could be. It made me feel like I could even think of myself as a Christian, but only because I came to it later in life through Vedanta. And so that's an experience of encountering others that, are right there on what you think are your own team. And so even in the Vedanta movement, there's internal diversity. And there's different ways that people approach the different yogas and different emphases that they have, because Vedanta isn't a replacement. Vedanta is complementary. And so, you can have people who are practicing Buddhists who have Vedanta. You can have practicing rabbis who have Vedanta. You can have, all of this. And so in the Vedanta movement, the idea is the doors and the windows are open to everybody. And we accept everything, and we invite in all that will come in the future. And just a couple of follow-ups with Abigail mentioning the Wicca. In 2018 in Toronto, the Parliament of World's Religions had a huge turnout of those who identified as Wicca. We had a database, and people could identify, and so there was a huge turnout at that time. I know because we measured it. And then one time I was involved in a Hindu-Catholic dialogue, Carol, and it was an all-day event at Loyola Marymount, and there was all kinds of comparativism going on. And at the end of the day, one of the Hindus stood up and asked the father, "I've been told my whole life that I need the church for my salvation. But we've had this conversation, and you see that there's all of these, similarities between, that things we share in common. Can you tell me now, do I need the Catholic Church for my salvation?" And the father said, with hundreds of witnesses, "No, you don't need the Catholic Church for your salvation." So the follow-up question was, how does that change your business? And the father says, not at all.
Oh, okay. I had some of the similar experiences with you, like, being in, I always say, the Catholic culture growing up. And then I went that spiritual route shift, and then eventually to the Unity Church and New Thought, even though I identify as spiritual. But yeah, I'm not not even surprised what you said about the priest. There is a shift I see in the Catholic Church that's more open to interfaith engagement and those type of answers. So I really think that's interesting. Wow. Okay.
Within
Cool.
Catholicism, you can find lots of perspectives from parish to parish, anywhere you go. And it just never ceased to amaze me that you know, the variety that, and this is, you know, they can be within about 5 or 10 miles of each other, and they can have very, very different perspectives on certain issues. And I think part of the problem is that, you know, there's just so much more that we need to be looking at, and it can't be honed down to a few sentences to be memorized and utilized.
Mhm. And that brings me to the the next topic, or the first topic, the main topic: curiosity from assumption to understanding. So, as you see, Elmo was just like, "Hey, I'm just curious. You know, I don't know everything about your experience, so I'm willing to ask." Which is something that comes up during even the pub theology gatherings that I do, because for some people, it'll be the first time meeting that Hindu or meeting a Muslim. And yes, people are surprised to hear that Muslims come to pub theology, and I always tell them that the Muslims come, but they don't drink. So I have to put that there because of the curiosity. But some things, it's things like that, because we naturally make assumptions like, why would a Muslim person be at this pub theology gathering? Well, they're there because they want to connect and have community with maybe other like-minded people who are open to learning about different faiths. You know, we also may assume that someone's political beliefs, you know, because of their religion. We may assume that someone values based on what they wear. We may assume someone practices everything associated with their religious tradition. We may even assume that someone has a religion at all. But, you know, labels only tell you so much. Two Christians can understand Christianity differently, as we discussed. Two Muslims can practice Islam differently. Two Jewish people may have very different relationships within Judaism. People identify as an atheist, agnostic, spiritual humanist, or even religiously unaffiliated have their own experiences. So curiosity allows us to move from, I already know what people like you believe, to tell me what this means to you. And this will come up with the next question. What is something that people often assume about your religion, spirituality, or worldview or community that does not accurately describe you?
Well, I believe in the New Thought faith, but many people outside of it thinks that we are New Age.
Yes.
And New Age and New Thought are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
We're not all collecting crystals. We're not all burning incense. We're not all doing the same thing. And that's what has been said before. You have so many different types of Christians, different types of Jews, different types of Buddhists. And until you get and meet the individual person, you do not know that.
Right. So it's like being in unity. Everyone assumes I'm not a unity, not a libertarian, but a Unitarian. They were like, "Oh, you're a Unitarian. Your church is down the street. This, that, and the other." And I'm like, "No, that's not. That's not unity. That's Unitarian." And then you have to go to the whole spiel about who unity is and what the New Thought movement's about. And in a lot of cases, they never even heard of the New Thought movement and all the different branches. I think maybe the closest typically has been the religious science connection. Even now they have a different name. So that becomes a whole nother topic there, explaining that. But yeah, they just automatically hear something that probably resonates closest to what they have a knowledge or awareness of as far as that particular religious or spiritual group.
So I have an experience because I have this hybrid belonging and a, a strong commitment to customs and traditions in our group, but it's unusual. You know, people use typical categories to try to figure out where I stand, you know. And so one thing that, you know, are you a monk? Well, you know, I am single, but I'm not ascetic, right? And I'm committed, and I have certain obligations and duties that I've taken on, and I have an intentional lifestyle, but I'm not mortified. I don't have to torture myself with all kinds of uh, thou shalt not this and that. And so this reminds me of I belong also to a group of Buddhist practitioners. And so one of the precepts is no intoxication. Well, then here I'm at pub theology with Jackie and I'm enjoying a beer. Well, how can you do that? I thought you were a Buddhist and Buddhists say no intoxication. Well, a beer isn't intoxicating. That's moderation. We have to use our discernment. And, on the Christian side of it, the monks got a gallon of beer and 3 pounds of fish every day when they joined in the medieval period. So, this is actually, one beer is nothing. So, this is ways that people have had assumptions, and, I seem to defy the usual boxes or expectations.
Any other thoughts? I do have a follow-up. How does it feel? Oh, someone else before I do the follow-up?
Yeah, that was me. I joined late, and so I'll jump in on this. Some of my faith history follows Patrick's. I was raised in a Roman Catholic family. Left that after a while. I won't go into all the details for this group, but I'm one of those strange, used to be Religious Science International, now we're Centers for Spiritual Living people.
Okay.
We here in Toledo, 10 years or more ago, before COVID, we lost our minister. She went to California, and the congregation was too small. We sort of splintered off. I now facilitate a group called Sacred Threads Spiritual Living Circles. It's sort of a program that Centers for Spiritual Living has that is sort of a discussion group, sort of an entree level thing for a small group in a community that doesn't have a religious science Centers for Spiritual Living center. We do have a Unity Church here, but I like to sleep in on Sunday morning. So we do our Sacred Threads facilitation on a Friday evening, um, and we're just four people. And when people ask me, how do you describe your faith? I just tell them that I'm a born again Jedi.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
I really don't go to a church anymore. The church that I felt most comfortable with is just too far for me to drive to now at this time. I've got some other issues but I've been part of a group that started during COVID that meets on Sunday morning and then Tuesdays and Thursdays in the evening. And on Sunday morning, we go through the whole discussion of the readings for the day. And we actually do process everything for the Mass and that type of thing. And then on the other days, we listen to other people talk and then we have discussions. And I actually feel closer to God since I've been doing that, and I've been doing that since COVID, and that than I did sitting in a parish as one of hundreds of people, and really not being recognized as being an individual. And so this here is much more close to me, and the people that I connect with on Sunday morning, and that are all across the country. We have people in New York, we have people in Detroit, we have people in Virginia, we have people in Kansas, we have people in Colorado. And there's about 4 or 5 of us from California. So we've got people from all over. So the discussions that we're getting are from truly different perspectives, because people live in different states and are experiencing different things. And as I said, that to me is a greater connection with God than anything that I found sitting at Mass.
Mm. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I do have a follow-up, and I want to put this in the chat. How does it feel when someone asks you a sincere question instead of an assumption? Especially on this faith-based journey, or anything that may come to mind. How does that feel? But particularly in the faith-based space.
Well, I feel like if somebody asked me a question and they really were curious, which is one of your 4 C's, right?
Yeah.
That would mean that they're truly interested in what I believe, and that feels good.
Yeah.
You know, rather than somebody just assuming that you believe this way or that way, and you say, no, that's not what I believe. That's not who I am. So I like it when the questions are sincere.
And me too.
I would second what Abigail said. I think we're so used to people just being politely curious, but not really curious. You know, it's like you can really tell the difference between a real sincere, like when you're having any conversation with any person, you can tell usually by the level of the question and whether a person probes for clarity or not, that they're really interested or not. And curiosity, believe it or not, is is rare among many people after a certain age, you know, or, you know, I guess there's some people who are very curious about the world and the universe and life and seem to maintain that throughout their lives. But then there are a number of other people who sort of develop a worldview very early in life, and they kind of stick to their mental models and their worldview, and so you don't see too much curiosity from them from that point on. So I definitely would agree with Abigail that when you really find somebody who's curious, genuinely curious, that's like a breath of fresh air.
Yes.
It also
Yeah.
makes you think about what you believe, you know, and when there's a dialogue, it's like, oh my gosh, what do I believe about that? You know, we had a friend, and Carol would know him. He's passed on, Reverend Glenn. What's his last name? Anyway, he said, the more I know about your faith, the deeper I need to go into mine, because if I'm going to share, Glenn Larson, if I'm going to share, I have to know what I believe before I share it. So that always kind of stuck with me. And I like that. I have to think about, what do I believe if that question is coming to me?
Yeah.
There's no risk in assumptions. With assumptions, you've already decided, you already know. There's no adventure, there's no discovery. But courage to ask a sincere question invites the unknown, and brings it into the light. And so you have to be adaptable to whatever comes out, as opposed to, I already know, that's within my control, it's flattened over there. It's to ask a question, a sincere question, is risky. You know, it can put you out of your comfort zone, and some people feel comfortable getting outside their comfort zone, and some people are disturbed by new ideas.
Yeah.
So sincere questions are and curiosity require courage.
Yeah.
I agree totally, Patrick. You're right on. when I come into a new group of people and I'm being introduced and someone says, "This is Reverend Steve," I try to point out, "I'm Steve. I came in, I'm Steve," because some people's concept of reverend means that I have to belong to what they perceive as a religious person. So most of the time it's, "Hi, I'm Steve. How's everything?" Oh, if I'm speaking, okay, I understand. You need to have a title. But if I just come into a group, please don't separate me. Please don't put me over there. And oh, you're a minister? What do you believe about? And then I I go for the food table. Uh, uh,
This is why even though I have received the sacred thread and I could call myself a swami, I don't, because people have all kinds of ideas of what that's supposed to be. So I hesitate, to do that sort of thing for exactly the reasons you say. You become a symbol then. Then people test you rather than encountering you as a friend.
yes.
All right. Thanks for sharing. So let's go to the next one. Compassion. Seeing the person behind the position. Compassion asks us to remember that people's belief often exists within a larger story. So curiosity helps us ask. Compassion helps us listen. And sometimes we encounter beliefs that are unfamiliar to us. And sometimes we encounter beliefs that we strongly disagree with. The challenge is learning to disagree without stripping another person of their humanity. So, again, when you look at the list here, family, culture, community, identity, tradition, personal experience, grief, hope, struggle, and meaning, we may never fully understand someone's worldview until we understand some of the experience that helped shape it. And with that, we go to the next question. Have you ever had a conversation with someone from a different religion or worldview that changed an assumption you had about them? And I know our folks here, some of us have already been through that and just shared through it, but it could just be any experience. What was that like when you had that conversation with someone from a different religion or worldview? Now, for example, when I first started in this work, I kind of kept everything based on what I learned in the texts I learned in college and things I read about people from other traditions. So I felt like everybody had their own way of doing things this way, and that was it. And then when I started to get to meet people in real life, I'm like, oh, you do the same things that I do, right? It's like not everybody is celebrating that religious holiday. Not everyone is doing Lent. And I learned this something recently too in the last few years of knowing Muslims. Not every Muslim is doing Ramadan. I had someone that I know told me that he just does the activities when he's around his family. I said, "Oh, this sounds familiar to like some of the things I heard with Christians that I know." So I had to learn that, I can't, at that time when I was younger, that I can't make assumptions based on all those things I've learned in my world religion classes. So if anyone had something, had the similar experience to that in their journey doing interfaith work or just in life in general.
Well, I had an experience years ago when we were first getting into into interfaith, and we had a speaker, and we were called Interfaith Summer Nights, and we had different leaders from different traditions. And one was an Imam Basim Saeed, and he brought his family and some of his friends. And of course, I was still in that Western mode. And after he had finished and everyone finished, I wanted to be a good hostess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I went up to him and I put my hand out to shake his hand. I said, "Thank you so much. Wonderful job, blah, blah, blah." He lovingly shook my hand. smiled and acknowledged and everything. And his family is standing around, right? And then he said very quietly, he said, I just want to let you know that in our tradition, men, if you're from our family, it's fine to hug and shake hands. But if you're not from our family, the men don't shake hands with women, and women don't shake hands with men. And he said, but I live in the Western world, and it happens all the time, so I'm fine with it. But just want you to know, because this is an interfaith setting. At first I felt, oh my gosh, I did something wrong, but he was so kind. And I realized this was a learning experience for me. And I think that when we're in that interfaith arena, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to make assumptions. And we just lovingly meet people that are willing to share and tell them, no, this is how we do it. But they're not blaming you. They're not making you feel uncomfortable. So I had that was a wonderful learning experience for me. And I learned something, I was at the beginning of my knowledge. And now I say, is it okay if there's something I wasn't sure that I should do or not do? So I always ask the question first now with people of a different tradition, so I don't step on their toes. But everyone I've met has been kind and willing to share what their tradition does and believes. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, one of the slide programs Abigail and I put together was called "How Not to Offend," and we went through 12 different faiths to make sure you understood things like when you walk into their prayer space, you take your shoes off. When you shake hands with someone or you want to shake hands, certain groups accept that, others don't. And that was probably one of the biggest early learning experiences that we had, to find out what shouldn't you do when you meet a fill in the blank.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I'll go to the next topic. Conversation, staying at the table. A lot of people talk about being invited to the table. How about staying at the table? So, conversation is where curiosity and compassion become practice. But meaningful conversation requires more than talking. It requires listening. It requires asking better questions. And sometimes it requires us, being willing to sit with discomfort. For example, debate asks, how do I prove my position? While dialogue asks, how can we understand each other? And I've experienced in some of the interfaith spaces where there were people trying to convince other people to see their side versus just understanding their perspective. So that's one thing I always think about is like, well, how can we understand each other? Because there are times when debate has value. But if you're going to do this from a perspective of relationship building, then dialogue will give us something, debate often can't. And dialogue creates space for complexity. And instead of saying, for example, well, why do Christians believe X, Y, Z? Try, what does your Christian faith mean to you? And instead of saying, well, why do Muslims do X, Y, Z? Try, how does your faith influence your everyday life? Or instead of how can you not believe in God? And I know a lot of people who are atheists, humanists, agnostic may get that kind of approach. You can give the perspective with your question by asking, how did you arrive at your worldview? So the difference is important. One interrogates and the other invites. So maybe in some cases in interfaith spaces, there may be some hesitancy because it may come across as an interrogation versus an invitation. So with the next question, what makes a conversation about religion or belief feel safe enough for you to participate honestly? Ooh, I see your face. And that's something that comes up in pub theology, because I tell people who get nervous about maybe because some people are drinking beer or wine or whatever, but no one's like drunk. But I always say to people, believe it or not, the areas where you may have a concern may come from people who are not drinking. It is real. I said, because there are some people who are very passionate about their personal beliefs and they feel everybody should believe the way they do, but we have protocol. So it's like, this is not a debate or recruiting. This is more of an invitation to learn and ask questions respectfully. So what makes a conversation about religion or belief feel safe enough for you to participate honestly?
I'll jump
They
in.
think
Oh, go ahead, Reverend Steve.
Either way, I think it really depends on the environment that you're entered into.
Mm-hmm.
If you come into a classroom and you're discussing something, that's obvious that you would feel safer to say things about what you believe about religion or faith or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest problem is that we get into positions that we don't expect. And somebody says, "Oh, let me introduce you to Charles." Now, you don't know Charles. You
Mm-hmm.
don't know what he believes in.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. So there's this, oh, I'm not going to ask any question. Charles, nice to meet you. Goodbye. And you go to the food table. Notice I always go to the food table. The idea that I want to learn, and maybe it's okay, some of you guys are a little bit younger. Um, as you get a little bit a little bit older, you don't care. Uh, this is who I am. This is what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And many of my books are about past life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Past life? What? Who? What do you mean you? I mean, you can argue and argue and argue. And I have had enough experience to know what I believe. But the question is, do you want to know about that? Are you comfortable doing that? And I think it's kind of asking the question to the audience, do you really want to know what I think? And then you're free to say it.
I don't think
I
most
would
people ask these kind of questions directly anyway, right? Unless there's a context for it. And if
Yeah.
there's a context for it, then it's I've already evaluated whether or not that's a context wherein I feel safe. But if somebody just walks up to me and says, "Hey, have you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior?" I'm gonna have an interesting conversation with that person because it's an irrelevant question to me. Uh, but they're starting off with an assumption that I'm either for or against their their belief system, and their job is to convince me, and I'm not easily convinced. So we're already at cross purposes here. So that's a different kind of situation. So, um, but I don't often find myself in um, confrontational religious discussions. We spent a lot of time when we established the men's group for multi-faith council, establishing some basic ground rules that restrict proselytization from the conversation. So we have some basic rules that say when you're here, you're not representing your faith like you represent all the Buddhists in the world. Well, I want to know what you think as a Buddhist about this. And so that creates an environment that gives people the freedom to ask questions that they personally want to know. And it's not a competition, it's an inquiry, and it's established that way. Our men's group meets monthly on the fourth Monday of the month, and we've met for 17 years now. With that, there are a couple of months where we don't meet, like December is usually kind of awkward. Um, uh, but we meet almost every month for 17 years. We've got a group of varying sizes. Sometimes we have new people come in. We have a lot of regulars. Um, and so we've got a very comfortable group. The setup is that whoever's hosting the meeting gets to pose a topic for the group, and the host also determines the location and provides the refreshments. And the topic is usually something topical or something just a spiritual inquiry. How does your faith tradition see this, right? Um, and then it's a very open, everybody has 5 minutes to say what they have to say, and then there's an opportunity hopefully for questions afterwards, but everybody gets a chance to have their say. So it's a really open forum. um, and it's a great place for having religious discussions.
I think the only thing I would add to what Joe and Steve said is uh, for me, because I work a lot in organizational development and I deal with people's behaviors, and I'm always aware of mental models that people have, uh, or concepts that influence their worldview in some way or another. And so what makes me feel safe in a conversation typically is being able to somebody has uh, doesn't have a sense of having a monopoly on the truth. When somebody doesn't have a sense of having a monopoly on the truth, then they typically engage in conversation and dialogue, and they are aware of different worldviews and aware of their own mental models. And so that definitely facilitates a real meaning, being able to go into greater depth versus being in a situation where people are sort of defending their worldview.
So uh, it's a safe space like this, uh, self-selecting. We all have already made commitments to show up in certain ways. So it's not like we're just going to drop in on some fanaticals and have a dialogue with them. You know what you can expect in a space like this, with respectful dialogue, curious, focusing on the relationship. So if you do get uncomfortable or things do get heated at some point, you can pull back from the brink. Uh, I've been in other situations where it's not self-selecting like this, and so you don't know that the person has a commitment uh, to bridge building, and sometimes this is very awkward. For example, this past spring for Vesak, the thrice blessed day when the Buddha was born, achieved enlightenment, and died at different times in his life, the full moon of May, the monk, the Buddhist monk who led the Walk for Peace, was in my neighborhood and was doing a weekend event here nearby in San Jose. And so I went out to walk with him and 1,000 other people, and listen to the talks and be in that Sangha experience. And it was in a public park, and some Christians, so-called, showed up with a microphone and a loudspeaker and turned their volume up as loud as was legally permissible, and stood in the place where they could assemble, and they stood there and ranted at the Buddhist group that was gathered together, telling them that they were going to hell because they were following Satan's false religion and all this kind of stuff, all through the entire weekend. It was live streamed, the event, and you can hear that loudspeaker blaring through the recordings of the live stream. It was there all weekend long. And to the credit of the Buddhists that were there, they just ignored it. They just kept on doing what they were doing, and don't pay any attention to that. We're here having our peaceful day. And engaging them with dialogue isn't going to work. Those kind of people are not interested in dialogue. They're interested in proclaiming and declaring, and so it's totally futile to try to bridge build and try to reach out and try to establish the relationship and come to an understanding with them. They're just there with their bullhorn. They're right. We're all wrong and going to hell. So context is really important on whether or not it's safe enough to have a conversation, and whether a conversation is even possible.
That's interesting, because I go with your response, Patrick, because that goes to the next one. Beyond tolerance. So this is where the idea of beyond tolerance that fits beautifully with the larger presentation. Tolerance has value in a diverse society. People may be able to coexist despite profound differences, but tolerance can also represent a very low bar. Tolerance can also mean, you stay over there, you do your thing over there, and I'll stay over here. We won't bother each other. Bridge building asks something more. It asks whether we can move from tolerance to understanding, to relationship, to cooperation. And that we don't have to erase our differences to build relationships, but in fact, authentic interfaith relationships allow people to bring their differences with them. So it's the goal isn't just basically like we hear in a lot of these spaces, we're all the same. We're one big family, this, that, and the other, because we're not. Our beliefs can be genuinely different. But the deeper question is, can we recognize those differences and still build something together? Which goes into the next question, which kind of, again, I was thinking about you, Patrick. What would it, from your experience, and this is for the whole group, what would it look like to move beyond just simply tolerating people who believe differently and actually build relationships with them? So even like that group that came out there with that negative approach towards the Buddhists, they may not, at the same time, that could be viewed as them as not loving their neighbor. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
I tried, Jackie. I did try. I unlike the Buddhists who were there that just kept on having their peaceful day, I said, I'm a bridge builder. I'm going to make a relationship and reach out and talk with these people and try to come to some peaceful understanding. And in 4 minutes of conversation, they declared me the Antichrist, and they put and the person who was they were taking turns on their bullhorn, and just ranting on their bullhorn, and it never stopped. I tried. Eventually, I just said, well, have your peaceful day. This makes me happy.
Yeah. Give yourself that boundaries and set limits for yourself is like, okay, I get it.
Well, I think one of the things is that I think it was great that the Buddhists stayed, and that they didn't get decided it wasn't worth the bother for them to continue on doing what it is that they were there to do, and ignore them. I mean, if you can't communicate with people, you shouldn't, by them not allowing them to drive them away, they've actually just stood their ground. And a lot of times I think that's the first part of having a conversation, is simply standing your ground. I have as much right to be here as you do. And what I'm doing is just as valuable as what you think you're doing is.
Let me see if I can jump into this question, Jackie, really quick, because I think this is a really, really key question, very perceptive question that the world really needs to look at. One of the initiatives that I feel personally happy about and excited about for the world is that in the Baha'i community that I come from, one of the initiatives that is a global initiative is just people having devotional gatherings where they get to worship or come together for a few minutes with their neighbors. And this is something my wife and I actually do every Sunday. We invite our neighbors to just pray together, just say prayers together. Everybody brings their own prayers. Some people have a faith, some don't have a faith. It really has no agenda except a spiritual moment where people come together to pray and to celebrate the divine source in the universe. And that feels to me every time we do it, and our neighbors come and friends come, it feels like it's helping to connect the planet a little bit, because there's so many people of faith and goodwill all over the world, but many believe that we pray to different gods and we're actually praying to the same God, at least in my understanding. And this question helps people move beyond just tolerance, because like you said, tolerance is a very low bar. And I do a lot of diversity work and have done a lot in my past. And I'm always talking about tolerance being the lowest level of unity that we can achieve, because if we can learn to respect one another, we go way beyond tolerance. And if we can learn, go beyond respect, we can get to a point of appreciation. And I always think about those couples who are married for many, many years. If you were married to your husband or your wife and you simply tolerated them, that would be a long marriage. But if you were married to your partner and you really respected them, you would learn a great deal. And then I think about the wonderful 38-year marriage that I have with my wife, and we've learned to appreciate each other's diversity in a way that we both continually learn from each other and support each other. So I agree with you 100% that tolerance is the lowest end of the bar. And if we can go into the relationship building to get to a point of appreciating each other and celebrating each other, that's where humanity, I believe, can really learn a lot.
With that group that stayed and didn't interact on that, they're probably some of the people who were trying to condemn them, who were probably, by the fact that they stayed and continued on, were probably impressed by the fact that they didn't feel threatened, in spite of the fact that that's what that group intended to do, is to make them feel threatened.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for everyone for sharing your answers to question 5. And then we'll go to the next slide. From conversation to connection. So we bring the 3 themes back together: curiosity, which is basically ask them rather than assume. Then we have compassion, is to be able to see the human being behind the belief. And then conversation, create space where differences can be discussed honestly and respectfully, which of course, the end result, these practices create connection, which I think is amazing. And with that, you think about it, it's like people from different traditions can connect and create opportunities for cooperation. We could come together And we don't need like our theology or particular belief system to feed hungry people, support our neighbors, respond to disasters, advocate for human dignity, address loneliness. That's a big one that's been coming up a lot, particularly with the younger generation. Serve communities, oppose hatred and religious discrimination, and celebrate together along as mourning together. Because basically, at the end of the day, sometimes the bridge begins surprisingly simple, is with through a conversation. So one reflection is, what is one thing you can do differently after today's conversation in your life? And of course, don't leave interfaith dialogue in this Zoom room. Take that curiosity, compassion, and conversation with you.
I'm involved in several interfaith groups in my area. And the one thing I notice is we don't have a pub theology. And I think that more people would get involved if they knew that we were going to sit around having a beer and some friendly conversations. So I'm thinking about ways to bring more people into conversation, whether it's the pub theology inspired or some kind of community dinner that includes a conversation menu. That was one thing that I liked, the framing questions that you had all along the way. So I've got a couple of ideas of how to engage more and try to weave stronger ties of relationship in my local community.
I spent many years with National Speakers Association, and that was before I got into the ministry. But what I learned there was, if you want to bring people into conversation, you've got to ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
Before you ask the question, you have to know your audience.
Yes.
And by knowing your audience and asking a question, you begin dialogue. And it's almost as simple as, okay, how many of you went to grade school?
Oh, yeah.
How many of you had a terrible teacher in grade school? So to bring in things that people would obviously have some relation to. We all had terrible teachers in grade school, at least one. We all had trouble when we were first learning to drive with our teacher who said that you have to do this. We were all dealing with parents that said you had to be home by a certain time. We all had these experiences. They're human experiences. And by recognizing that you ask a question about something that every human's going to go through, now you've got dialogue. I talk too much.
Oh, I just like to share the idea of conversation is so important. Our Power Interfaith team put out a questionnaire, and what we found out at the beginning of the year, that people are tired of business meetings. So what we have incorporated, we just started doing this every other month, we would have a connections meeting, activity, gathering, where instead of doing business, what we do is we talk, and we would have a conversation. But like Steve said, it would always begin with a question. Mm-hmm. And the first one we had was on what music nourishes your soul, what music nourishes your spirituality. And we had people singing and playing their guitars. We had a lot of wonderful sharing. People showed up that never had met before because they wanted to share their music. And the second one, which we actually did with the Interfaith Awareness Week, was the question, how does your faith improve your life? What are the misconceptions about your faith? So it gets the question going to each person rather than a conflict. You're saying, tell me about that. How does your faith improve your life? And people love sharing about how their faith improves their life. And then the people listening get a better idea, especially the misconceptions. There's always some misconceptions. So here's a way we can share about, okay, this is a misconception. And it's like an aha moment when we start sharing this way. And one of the other questions, what is the one spiritual practice that grounds you or roots you to God, to spirit, to whoever you pray to? So, like you say, asking the questions shows curiosity, shows I want to know more about you. And then you have a chance to share as well. So anyway, that's what we're doing in the Poway Interfaith team, trying to do the connections every other month and gather with a question about somebody else.
Okay. Any other reflections?
I just want to mention that one of the earlier sessions, I met Deacon Steve Herrera during this Interfaith Awareness Week. He's in San Jose, which is east of where I'm at, but he's doing very similar work in interfaith engagement with farm worker communities and in civic projects, community service, community care. And so attending these meetings and being introduced to others who are doing similar work. And he's close enough that next weekend we're going to meet. And so we're taking it out of the Zoom calls from this week. And next week we're close enough that we're going to meet. We're going to talk about the kinds of work that we're doing and where it overlaps. And since we have, we're kind of covering a similar region that's interconnected, we're strengthening a relationship that began here. And so I just like taking it out into the real world like that. And so I'm so appreciative that forums like this exist where I can meet collaborators, like-minded people, and we can support each other in all the ways that we need, practically and personally, professionally.
Thank you.
Jackie,
Yes.
sorry, Jackie, I would love to be able to take curiosity, compassion, and conversation to other forums. And I really appreciate the way you structured the workshop today, because you got us all to think about a lot of meaningful questions. And I like what Steve said about knowing your audience and asking your audience questions that are relevant to them, to really create that connection and to facilitate that conversation. So is there a way we can get copies of your presentation or the slides or the questions that you pose to us?
Sure. I can give it to. I guess, do I send it to you? Well, I have your contact information, Charles. I can send it to Reverend Albert too, if he has his own distribution. Or I can just. What is? I guess
hoping,
it's a PDF.
Okay.
Download.
I just, so you know, all the presentations this week, we're hoping will be turned into YouTubes.
Yes.
And you'll be able to access every one of them, all the ones you missed while you were working or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That was real important to us.
Okay. I could definitely. I'll be putting this on YouTube for Reverend Albert to share.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Jackie, I still want that PDF though, if you can, if you can share that.
I got you. I got your email. I'll get that to you. Let me make a note right here. All right. Any other thoughts for the closing reflection?
I just want to say one thing. I love listening to every speaker that I've listened to, but I've also gotten so much wisdom and knowledge from all of the collaborators and participants who share their perspectives and their thoughts and their ideas. So I just wanted to thank everybody who's on here. I got so much out of all your comments as well as Jackie's.
Well, I'm glad everybody was able to come out today, and I'm definitely going to watch the previous presentations because it was a crazy week here for me to catch them during the day. So I want to make sure I watch those because it's nice to see what people are saying and how they're presenting. And
Thank
with
you,
that, oh, go ahead.
I just say thank you, Jackie, so much for today. I appreciate it. It was
Oh yeah, because
great.
I'm thinking, definitely today with again with doing this work to take interfaith dialogue. I mean, I like the idea that some creating your own event or listening without doing a rebuttal, correct the stereotype. When you hear one, that reminds me of someone who had said at a iftar at an interfaith iftar, like they didn't understand why people rub the Buddhist belly. So we had to go through a whole, explanation about that at the event. I always encourage people to visit other faith communities, just, just be there to observe. And as always, invite people into a conversation. I think that is very key. And do your own self-study and learn, read about other people's, traditions and for your own curiosity's sake, just to say, hey, I'm very curious about this particular belief system. And we're so fortunate that libraries are still with us. So we could definitely go to the library to do that. Or simply do like coffee time for people who may not want to do the puppyology thing. They say, hey, I don't do drink, I can't be around drinks. And like, you can always go for coffee or tea.
So Jackie, why do people rub the Buddha's belly?
They believe it's good luck to do that.
That's what I heard too.
Yeah, but I had to tell a lady that's not actually what Buddhists do. She said they rub his belly. I said, no.
I don't know any Buddhists to do that. So.
I have never seen a Buddhist go and like rub, the belly. But I've seen over the years they believe that's good luck. Because sometimes I've seen it too with people if they have their shrine, and that's what they would do. They will have their own shrine, even if they're not, and especially particularly if they're not Buddhists and do that. But I tell her, as a Buddhist, don't do they don't do that. I said, no, they don't do that. I said, people do it for good luck, but people probably just been doing that because they heard other people do it. But I said, no, that's not what Buddhists do. All right, final thoughts. We don't build bridges by pretending our differences don't exist. So definitely I want to thank everyone for participating. And of course, to keep in touch with me, I'll have it on the next slide with Interfaith Connections. I'm, getting to the next chapter of that. Now that things are coming back together on my end, I'm trying to catch up with my potential regular host. I hope she agreed to the opportunity. I just got to catch up with her. So I'm hoping in the future, I'll be able to introduce her to you. And then, of course, as always, we don't build bridges by pretending our differences doesn't exist, but we build bridges when we're curious enough to ask, respectfully, compassionate enough to listen, and courageous enough to stay in a conversation. So I thank everyone for coming out today and enjoying the slide. My contact information, particularly my email, is here. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm Jackie Fuller. And any other questions? I know we have a few minutes before. Well, my end will be 2:30. Any other final thoughts or questions you want to share before we close out today?
Where are you located, Jackie? What
I'm
part of the
located.
world?
Oh, I'm here in the United States. I'm located in Alexandria, Virginia, which is 20 minutes away from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Where I grew
No,
up.
I'm from Toledo, Ohio, so we're
Okay.
at least in the same time zone.
We are in the same time zone. Ohio is a place I need to visit. I have family I haven't seen there since the 1980s. I'm still trying to get there. People on my mom's side, they're in Ohio.
Time to plan a trip.
Yes, I need to plan. That was my original plan, and then things got crazy here on my end. last winter and now spring. So I'm back in full effect. So just getting reconnected. And I said, this is one way to start doing interfaith stuff. So yeah, I'm very glad I was able to do the presentation today, because I know a lot of people were competing for those spots. Reverend Albert offered, and I almost forgot to get mine. So I was like, "Oh, there's a spot." So, I was happy to be able to do this
again, Jackie. Love you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It was wonderful.
All right,
Thank
thanks
you
for
very
coming in.
much.
Take care.